Summer was fading fast, and the window for attempting the long and dangerous ocean crossing had already started to close, when on September 6, 1620, an aging 180-ton ship called the Mayflower set out on her own across the North Atlantic on what would prove to be one of the most historic voyages of the millennium.
They weren't the people that you would expect to be founding a new colony. At least half of them were separatists, that is to say, radical Protestants, who were religious exiles, who had been living in Leiden, the Dutch Republic.
Suddenly, these Leideners, who had spent 10 years cultivating their own spiritual, very inward bond, found themselves on a ship sharing their space with strangers.
Undersupplied and overcrowded, and with the strangers the investors had insisted go with them. The Mayflower left Plymouth Harbor, off the south coast of England. William Bradford remembered her finally setting forth under a prosperous wind.
And so they left. But they knew they were pilgrims, and looked not much on these things, but lift up their eyes to the heavens, their dearest country.
If you wanted to go to America, you should try to leave February or March at the latest, so you could get there in the spring and give yourself a full spring and summer to become accustomed to the new world and to do all the things you had to do before the winter set in. In fact, of course, they ended up leaving in September, which was about as bad as it could be.
Early on the morning of Thursday, November 9th, 1620, after more than 2 months at sea, a crew member spied a line of high bluffs. It was the first land they had seen in 65 days. But even before they dropped anchor, long festering tensions between the strangers and the pilgrims broke out into the open. Many of the strangers began to speak openly of splintering off and going their own way once they came ashore.
This day, before we came to harbour, observing some not well affected to unity and concord, it gave some appearance of faction. It was thought good there should be an association and agreement, that we should combine together in one body and submit to such government and governors as we should by common consent agree to make and choose, and set our hands to this that follows.
Thank you.
Word for word.
On the morning of November 11th, 1620, the Mayflower Compact was offered up for signature. The vast majority of the men on board put their names to the paper, stating that they agreed to combine themselves together into a civil body politic with the power to enact whatever laws proved necessary to preserve the group. Years later, when William Bradford and others codified the rules of Plymouth Colony in a new book of laws, on the very first page, they described the compact as a solemn and binding combination, whose authority came from the fact that it was based upon the vote of the governed.
The Mayflower Compact was written out of necessity. There were 2 urgent issues that needed to be dealt with. In fact, nobody was permitted to even leave the Mayflower to go ashore until these 2 issues were dealt with, and the Mayflower Compact was the answer for both. The first issue arose due to the fact that they were blown way off course. They were supposed to land in Virginia. Virginia already had a charter by the king, and as such, it had government and a king as its protector. But Plymouth had no such charter. It had no governing document, no governing body, no king. The pilgrims and the strangers needed to establish a government, independent of the realm, a form of self-government. The Mayflower Compact was that self-government. Their landing in the wrong place led to the second issue, mutiny. There were two groups of people aboard the Mayflower, the religious pilgrims and the non-religious merchantmen they called strangers. The strangers were obligated to work for the realm, but they were not landing in the realm. They began to question, if we are not in the realm, do we need to work? William Bradford quickly recognized the potential for mutiny and knew he needed a solution. The Mayflower Compact was the result. There are three types of self-government: individual, relational, and societal. The individual self-government is controlling oneself or self-control. Sometimes we develop rules or a moral code to help give structure to individual self-government. Relational self-government is the ability of two or more human beings to carry out a mutually beneficial relationship. Sometimes we enter into contracts, enter into marriage, etc., to give structure and boundaries to relational self-government. Societal self-government becomes much more complex because there are many, even millions of different people, ideas, beliefs, personalities, wants, fears, and 1,000 other differences. The pilgrims and the strangers had different beliefs, different reasons for traveling to America, and different loyalties. It was necessary for them to establish a written document for them to come together in societal self-government. Before they created a king or a governor or any government office, they first established the government. It was not a person, it was not a group of people, it was not a king. It was an agreement written on parchment. It was a thing. It was an object. The Mayflower Compact, that man-made object, allowed the pilgrims and the strangers to settle many of their differences and live together as one people. If you were to create an object, like a compact, to help you govern yourself and some of your classmates, what do you think it would look like? What structure would you design? What rules would you put in it? How would you protect it? When you start to think about how you would create a compact, suddenly the Mayflower Compact becomes much more interesting.
How's everything going? I hope you've had some success with self-government in class. Things should get better with some rules for the teacher and the director. But be careful though. History is full of examples of rulers changing their minds. Hacking into class videos is way too risky. So this time, I've managed to get some information into the director's newsletter. When you read the newsletter, be sure to read the entire thing, every word on every page. Consider signing up for the SGW club or taking the boxing class, and consider tutoring. If teachers' rules are still too oppressive, you might want to consider other options. Good luck and be brave.